In Psalm 139, it says that God has fearfully and wonderfully made us.
Today on the program, we have Dr. Gregory Jantz. He's the author, counselor, and eating disorders specialist, and he's written many books on eating disorders and weight loss and addictions and so forth. He is also the founder of The Center, which is a treatment center specializing in whole person care. I like that. Whole person care, medical, physical, psychological, emotional, nutritional, fitness. Wow, everything. So welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back on the show.
Well, and we've got an important topic today.
Yes,
well, we do, and you've written a great book here, Greg, Hope, Help, and Healing for Eating Disorders. And you can go on the Miracle Channel website. This is BP offer number 48. $30. That includes shipping and handling. You know, Greg, when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about these terms.
Right,
Anorexia, bulimia.
Yeah.
I don't know that we ever talked about people necessarily overeating that much. You just usually had something derogatory to say if they did it and it became obvious.
Right.
But so what's the deal with this in our culture?
Well, let's look at this on a continuum. We've got self-starvation, anorexia on one side.
Okay.
We've got maybe binge eating, people that are maybe secretly binge eating. We've got bulimics who usually binge eat, and as well as they'll purge, in other words, throw up the food. Maybe they'll purge through exercise, but they have some way of dealing with it. Then we've got people that kind of switch between back and forth. You know,
Really?
they dance between anorexia, bulimia, binge eating.
Wow.
Some new things that we're seeing these days. There's a new term right now called drunkorexia.
Drunkorexia.
And what we're seeing, and we see about 75% of our gals in the 18, 19 age range also mix alcohol with their binging behaviors. Or they will starve throughout the day, drink alcohol, like binge on alcohol, and then binge on food, and then they're purging everything.
Wow.
My goodness.
So eating disorders, that term's kind of scary, eating disorder, but eating disorders are on the increase. We're seeing women who are seeking help for the very first time in their 40s.
How long have they been engaged
secretly for years.
They're
Yes.
finally admitting it.
Yes, that I have a problem. And literally it's been, if you will, hidden in the closet. They've kept it secret.
Wow.
You can keep, if you're bulimic or a binge eater, you can relatively keep that a secret. You can look fairly normal.
Yeah.
But there's this awakening point where something, your body breaks, something goes wrong, and it's a point of panic. You see, all eating disorders take you far, like any addiction, farther than you ever wanted to go.
Gotcha.
And the real danger with the eating disorders is we live in a denial that I'm in charge, I'm in control of it, and you continue that behavior.
And many people have died. I think about Karen Carpenter, one of my favorite singers
Yes.
years ago. I mean, she died, and we thought, why? She had an eating disorder.
Yes.
Is it predominant in Christians?
Well,
are we seeing a rise in Christians?
We are. And what we're seeing among Christian women, because let's just say alcohol, drugs are not acceptable, or other
Right.
addictions, but we all got to cope with food, or have to deal with food.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so an eating disorder is probably the most common. When I say eating disorder, again, we could say food addiction. Just it's somewhere on that continuum of eating disorder or disordered eating.
Yeah.
And we know that this can get a stronghold in a person's life. And, you know, really the enemy can grab this in the person's life. And, anorexia is the number one has the number one death rate in all psychiatric disorders.
Really?
Yes, there's more people that die of anorexia than what you would imagine.
My
It's
goodness.
heart failure.
They starve themselves to death.
Heart failure.
The potassium levels drop and their heart stops beating. Okay. Now, on the death certificate, it may not say anorexia, but that's what's happened. So I really and passionately believe that there's answers for eating disorders. It's not about, blaming a person. Well, how can you do this? You can't speak rationally to an eating disorder. It's not a rational problem.
That's true.
Okay.
Okay? It's like you cannot talk an anorexic into eating. You cannot talk an anorexic into saying she's too skinny, because she's going to look at her arms and say, my arms are fat, but you're seeing skin and bones.
Yeah.
See, you cannot deal with it in a rational way. I'll tell you.
Total
I'll tell you-
deception.
yes, total deception.
Total deception.
Yes.
Wow, that's a work of the enemy.
So you can
Yeah.
see how there's a spiritual side to an eating disorder.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's where the first step starts.
Well, yeah, I believe for long-term success, this is why we've got to look at the whole person.
yeah.
You know, you've got, because it creates a bondage. And then an eating disorder rarely stands alone. It brings in other addictions. The eating disordered person who's secretly popping prescription pills, or too many of them, or
Diet pills.
yeah, diet pills. The person that's added in laxatives to their
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them doing that too.
yes. And I just, Val, you said something that was real important. Is this a problem among Christian women? It's a greater problem than we ever imagined.
Really? Why?
Because we can keep it secret, and food's the one thing we can choose, or anorexic not choose. And it's something that we feel that we can control.
Yeah.
But the very thing we feel we can control ends up controlling us.
True.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening. You engage in these behaviors. You know, it takes about 3 months of binging and purging for most people before you really begin to alter the metabolism. And it's frightening to think about, but you've altered your metabolism such, in other words, you've slowed it down because your body's basically confused.
Yeah.
You're starving, binging, and the body doesn't know what's going on. Okay? You've lowered your metabolism. You continue in that pattern. Do you know having an eating disorder earlier on, your 20s and 30s, is pretty well a guaranteed way to have a weight problem later? Because your body's metabolism is being slowed down prematurely.
Okay.
So
okay. Yeah.
a lot of times people who have had eating disorders, now there's things we can do to help with all that. But you know, the very thing you've become afraid of is what happens later.
Wow.
So an eating disorder is not a solution to anything.
No, it's not.
What is the whole person approach?
Well, I tell you, I am so exuberantly passionate about the whole person approach. You know, you cannot address the problem of an eating disorder without the whole person approach. When somebody comes to us, we're going to immediately take blood work. We're going to look at chemistries in their body, their brain chemistry. We want to know, are there deficiencies? You know, there's common deficiencies, there's B vitamin deficiencies, there's nutrient deficiencies. Okay? One of the things that we do, we even do IVs of vitamins. We start to put that back into the body so that a person can begin to feel better, a little bit better.
Yeah.
Then they can start to take benefit of, you can't do counseling with a person with an eating disorder if their brain's not awake and their brain's not working right and their digestion's off. We got to get them feeling better physically. And that's gradual, it takes some time, but that's the whole person approach. So, you know, we've got to lay the spiritual on top, deal with the emotion. You know, every eating disorder person has had something that's happened. I look at the emotional side. Again, there's been some hurt. Something has happened from somewhere.
Is it abuse?
Sometimes it is abuse, but you know, it's interesting. You say, well, a person has an eating disorder, they've been sexually abused. The reality of that is that's not, maybe 50-50. You know, and it's not any higher in eating disorders. But what they can relate to is they've been a victim usually of emotional abuse.
Okay.
Okay, emotional abuse, unmet emotional needs. And so they learn to turn to food.
Great book, Hope, Help, and Healing for Eating Disorders by Dr. Gregory L. Jantz. You'll want to get a copy of this. If you or someone you know and love are struggling with this problem, go on Miracle Channel website, miraclechannel.ca. This is BP offer number 48. $30 includes shipping and handling. We'll be back in just a moment to talk more about this subject.